Setting out to be an entrepreneur is not everyone's ambition or path. Our guest today, Dr. Manasa Mantravadi, is a trained pediatrician who has a passion for children, helping to keep others healthy and take care of them. And it wasn't until later in her career that she really looked into what goes into our children's servingware, their plates, their cups, and all of the dangers that are involved with plastic. I'll be honest, I never had really thought about this much before and why stainless steel offers a better option for our kids to help them with their futures. Now, what's really interesting about Manasa's experience in this is that her parents are from India. She was born in India, but raised in America. And eating off of stainless steel plates and cups and forks and spoons is something that they just knew that's what they all did there. But it wasn't until becoming a doctor and learning more and more about the dangers that she thought she wanted to offer something for our kids that isn't available on the market, or it wasn't until she created Ahimsa, which is a product available now today that you can help your children have a more healthy future through a product that she helped invent. So let's hear her story and how she was able to create something that came from the heart, but is now blessing us all. So you want to make an impact. You're thinking about starting a business, sharing your voice. How do women do it that handle motherhood, family, and still chase after those dreams? We'll listen each week as we dive into the stories of women who know. This is Call Me CEO. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Call Me CEO, and you are in for a major treat today. We are talking with Dr. Manasa Mantravadi, who is an expert at the American Academy of Pediatrics and has developed a product line just for children to help them stay safe with what they're eating. What is in our plastics? What are we aware of as parents, and what do we need to be aware of? And I can't wait to dive into this story with you, Manasa, today about how you got started with this amazing business.
Hi, it's so great to be here. I always love talking to fellow mamas. It's the best.
It really is the best. And it was so fun to read your bio. You said you have 3 children, and I love that you describe them as curious and kind. Like, what a everyone wants kids that are curious and kind. Like, what a wonderful description. Tell me more about your kids, your family, and where you grew up.
Yeah. So so my kids are young. So they're like 7, 7, and 4. So I've got twins. I grew up. So I was actually born in India. I came here when I was 3. My father was kind of training to go into medicine. And so that's when we immigrated here. I grew up in all sorts of places. So Oklahoma, then New York, and then Indiana. Those like really kind of a really wide range of geography. And so I grew up in New York, and then we came to a small town in Indiana after living in New York, and we spent our weekends going to Broadway shows and being in the city. And then we moved to a really teeny tiny town in Indiana. So that was a real culture shock for me as an adolescent female.
How old were you at that point?
I was just entering 6th grade, which seems like the most untimely time to move. for
that's a hard time. Yeah, for sure.
Hard time. And so I was already, a bit different because I was, a minority in a very like Midwestern town. And then on top of that, I had a very thick New York accent. I, didn't fit in right away, but it was really great because go figure, after all those years in Indiana, I swore I would go back to New York for college and go to NYU, and go figure. I, wanted to stay close to home and went to Indiana University, and have never really left the Midwest because I fell in love with it. So go figure after all of that.
Can you take me a little bit back to feeling different as a child and growing up? I would imagine in New York, that's the melting pot of everywhere. I'm like a Utah girl, white Utah girl. I love hearing stories about diversity and what that was like for you growing up and how you acclimated to different situations. What was that like?
Yeah. So growing up in New York, it was interesting because so Indians are a very young immigrant population, actually. So if you look at Indians across the board, really we just start, we're a very new immigrant group in relation to all immigrant groups, because really everyone's an immigrant in this country.
Right. Absolutely.
And
yeah.
So It was really like not until the 60s and 70s, like the first wave. So if you really think about that context, it's really,
Yeah.
very
Pioneering, really. Yeah.
really, yeah. So we were kind of amongst the first. And so my parents, as well as many other immigrants, kind of banded together. And so growing up, I went to school with people who didn't necessarily look like me. At home and on the weekends, it was, all these people who looked like me, and we ate the same food and we had the same culture. We listened to the same songs. And so I think it's a testament to immigrant parents to say, like, I'm moving across the world, bringing you to a totally new space that I've never been, and I'm far away from my own family, but I'm going to form this new family of people who are very similar to me, and ensure that you can experience everything there is about American culture, but then really hold on to our roots and embrace our culture, because you want that to last. You want that to last even in a new environment. So that was like a really great part about my upbringing, and I think a lot of immigrants, is that, in this country, you can kind of celebrate all of these different cultures. And so, because we were so young, when I grew up, it wasn't, now Bollywood, and we've got, Kamala Harris and Mindy Kaling, like all these things are really the norm. And having my children watch, Mira the detective, which is the first Indian, Disney character,
Yes.
Female lead. I mean, that did not happen just a generation ago. And I would be, if we had to do like an Indian dance and celebrate our specific culture and traditions we had, I remember being like really weary of wearing Indian clothes and having my friends see me. And I was almost, at that age embarrassed because it was different. But then as I grew up, it was really interesting. You started to kind of find each other like in college, and you kind of did these really cool cultural programs together. And then honestly, there was just enough of us where it's like, oh, this is really cool to be Indian, and let's celebrate our culture more openly and not just at home.
Yeah.
And so that's been quite a journey for me, just as a first generation Indian here, and now having my own kids live really a really different upbringing, where in their schools we're celebrating Diwali and doing all sorts of cool things that.
Oh, I love it. I like have chills listening to you talk about it, because I love seeing celebration of culture and just education. And there's so much beauty in learning about all different types of cultures and religions. And I remember one of my first introductions to Bali was So You Think You Can Dance.
Oh,
I don't know if you ever watched that. And I was I grew up as a dancer. So watching that, I was just blown away by the beautiful movements and costumes. And they talked about how it was so important to have specific hand placement and how it can mean different things. And it's such a beautiful culture.
And we all, I grew up doing classical Indian dance, actually called Bharatanatyam. And it was like originated in temples, and it was a lot of storytelling. So those hand movements and the bells on your feet to keep the beat were such a cool thing that now like my own daughters do. So it's awesome that I think that our parents felt so strongly about keeping those cultural roots, so that we could pass it on, but then embrace this very new culture that they were not used to, but say like, let's celebrate that too. And so I feel really blessed that I had an upbringing that celebrated two very different cultures and was able to kind of meld them and now offer my kids, I hope, the best of both worlds.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm curious to ask you a question, because I had a guest on actually the episode just aired last week, but my guest is Indian. She was actually in India when I recorded with her. And something that really interested me, and I'm curious how it is for you as well, but this is my perception, that women are really encouraged to go for whatever they want. Like there's nothing that's like, this is a gender specific, like boys do this and girls do this. It seems like they're like, no, be the doctor, be the chemical engineer, be this, be that. Is that the same? Is that a good assumption, or is it not that way? What do you think about that?
I think it really depends. I think traditionally, like much like gender roles have changed drastically in the past few decades, kind of globally, I think India has followed a lot of those same trends.
Okay.
Because like very, very traditionally, many, many years ago, like the female was at home taking care of the kids and not working. And so I think that kind of shift into, become a professional and kind of explore what you want to, is more recent, I would say. I don't think that is like, now what is interesting about specifically the immigrant population here, why, in full disclosure, you do see a lot of female physicians or like Indians in medicine, Indians in engineering, Indians in like very specific roles. It actually had a lot to do with kind of the immigration that happened in the 60s and 70s. And so it's a byproduct of that because the US was essentially offering visas to really highly educated immigrants. And so India just happened to be, that was really their entry point into the country, right? And so there was a whole slew of doctors and engineers and really like kind of, professionals, like the immigrant wave was from professionals. And so that kind of has perpetuated into.
Okay, that's a good insight because I was curious about that. I'm like, man, these women are killing it. Doctor, like it's just.
I would say like a large portion of us probably had parents in those professions. And so naturally, when you see that at home or you kind of experience that at home, it rubs off on you.
Sure.
I always knew I wanted to go into medicine because I watched my father and his patients, and it's such a special profession where you're truly interacting with another human about their life, about their health. Like there is nothing more important than that.
I agree. If you don't have your health, what do you have? Have you been thinking about trying to discover your why and maybe defining your purpose a little more clearly? Well, I created a free 5-day email sequence that helps you do just that. It helps you dive into who you are, what your special talents are, and even pushes you a little bit out of your comfort zone with asking questions of people that are close to you. So go to callmeceopodcast.com to access that. And I have a little sneak peek of something up and coming about how to become a virtual assistant. So if that is something that you would think you might want to do in the future, stay tuned, get subscribed to the newsletter so you can hear about all the details because we will have special discounts for those who are subscribed to our email list. You can go there and find more information at callmeceopodcast.com or camillewalker.co. So talk to me about getting into the medical field and what that was like for you and what you wanted to do from the beginning. It sounds like that was a passion that started early.
Yeah, I always celebrated, my father was so wonderful about teaching. I think that came second nature to him. And so learning about science and physiology was always something that I enjoyed kind of growing up. I was definitely one of those, like high achieving, I have to get A's, kind of just very self-driven, even as a young kid. But it was really internal. That's the other part of our culture. It's like people do really place a large emphasis on education, like education first, like this is your job is school.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that was kind of ingrained in me. And then kind of watching this and it was just something I gravitated towards. And, so I decided to go to med school. And from the beginning, I think my mom has this written when I was in kindergarten, I said I was going to be a pediatrician. Like, I'm going to be a pediatrician. And I spelt it with a SHIN, like pediatrician, like that's what I'm doing. And it's because I think I've always, in addition to the love of learning, I've always loved kids from the start. So I was the 9-year-old taking care of the 3-year-olds. I was the 14-year-old, running camps for the 8-year-olds. I always had this affinity for children, even as a child. And so that was kind of a perfect meld as I kind of went into the career of medicine, that children were where like I was supposed to be. Like I was supposed to be there for them. And what I fell in love with during medical school and residency is being able to interact with children on a daily basis is really rewarding because they're the smartest, most curious, purest people like literally in the universe. And being able to kind of interact with them on a daily basis really kind of grounds you and puts perspective on life. I think it makes your job really fun to do what you're doing. And I think the bigger picture is that whatever you do as a physician, as a pediatrician for a child has such a lasting impact. We call it early intervention.
Mm-hmm.
So not that like all hope is lost with adults, but you have such a greater impact on a kid because they're young and they are resilient and they're able to, like, whatever impact that you have on their health or their mental health or their outlook on life is so lasting. And you have such a room to impact a human, like one single human, from whatever it is you do. And so that's why I went into pediatrics, because I felt like, like whatever happened to them, whether it was they fell off the playground or unfortunately they got cancer or whatever it was, children are so pure. Like they didn't do anything. Not that adults do things to deserve stuff, but we have a choice in kind of what we eat and maybe the high risk behaviors that we do that put us at risk for certain diseases, let's say. But children aren't that way. They just are, and so whatever cards they're dealt. And so that's what really drew me to them, that they're like their innocence and purity and their ability, like our ability to really be able to provide a lasting change for them.
That's so fascinating. And I'm very familiar with early intervention, that language. I have an education degree. So those things that you're talking about, they ring true with my experience as well. So you go
I always said if I wasn't going to be a pediatrician, I was going to be a teacher.
Teacher.
I just loved science and medicine so much.
You just wanted to do school for a really long time.
Exactly.
That's really cool. I want to hear about when you went into medical school. Was that a daunting, like the idea of going? I mean, you saw your dad, so you had that equipment and you had a lot of training and love for it. But did you feel overwhelmed, or did you ever feel discriminated against because you were a woman? What were the numbers like that and the ratio? Like, how were you treated?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I actually feel very strongly about this topic. And I was just on a panel for our student interest group at my university, at our medical school, called AMWA, American Medical Women's Association. And there was a big kind of shift. So when I started, we didn't make up quite half of the class. And it's what's really cool about our medical school is you can walk in the hallways and see all the composites. So every class photo over the past 100 years, you can see. And when you start that journey, you're like, where are the females? There's like zero. There are zero females. And then you start to see maybe one face for like 10 years. And then you see maybe 2 and 3. And so that has been a journey in itself, women in medicine.
Yeah.
And now I'm so proud to say we make over half the medical students in terms of like actual medical colleges. And so there is this like shift. Now, does that mean everything is even? No. So a prime example, we were just talking with our students. There are many times still as an attending physician that I walk into a room and I can have a complete conversation with parents and their children. And then I'll walk out and somebody will say, oh, they said the doctor didn't come into the room. And I was like, I literally just had this entire conversation. Or I'll come in and they'll say, oh, where's the doctor? I'm like, right, it's me. But this is not unique to me. Like we were having these conversations the other day. The number of, like, I would say the vast majority of female physicians have been asked that question over and over and over again. So clearly we are not where we need to be. And I think in pediatrics, it's a little softer than like my surgical colleagues. Females in surgery get asked that a lot. They get treated very differently, even by their own OR staff in relation to their male counterparts. So it's very interesting because we've made a lot of strides, but we have a long way to go.
Yeah. Do you feel like your professors treated you well as you were going through your schooling?
Yeah, that's interesting. So I think that, I've never felt, so I've had experiences where I've clearly been discriminated against as a female. So I would say one example is in my training. I did have a male attending who, I was in training, was already a physician in training, and had twins, pumping, because these are the things that you have to do, like, right. And
wait, just back up for a minute. Wait, you were a doctor in training, you were a physician, and you were pumping for twins.
Correct.
Oh my gosh. Like, what? Like, what did your schedule? You just blew my mind. Like, what did your schedule even look like? Like, how?
Oh, you don't even want to hear about it. Cause it's like, so, I think I think that people really, truly don't understand what we do as physicians, not because, people don't necessarily know behind the scenes, but in our training, I mean, you have lectures because you're still training. So you have lectures you need to be at. And then you have patients you have to take care of. And then you have like tests you still have to study for. And this is all really important, right? Because if we're being tasked with being in charge of somebody's health, you better believe that you want your physician well-trained and well-studied. And because they're, giving you a medication or advising you on your health or operating on you, you better want that person to have gone through a very long training and grueling training to be able to handle that. But I don't think a lot of people understand the real path of medicine. I think they see the end product of, what a doctor does, but the behind the scenes, how much we do, and kind of the emotional burden and all of the other things that we do, is not really things that people talk about, except within our own circles, And so, so I had a time, and especially females, right? So, the thing about medicine is that you're such on this linear path, right? Like you go to med school, and then you do residency, and then maybe you do fellowship, and then you are a doctor, and you just keep going. And it isn't until more recently when females are able to talk to females a bit more to say, like, it's okay, because guess what? Like, you may have kids and you may have to pump during your clinics, and there are things that are going to happen that a man just won't have to endure, So I would be, waking up, I'd often nurse my babies and then go off to my lecture, but then you'd have to pump. And so there were times that, like, after a patient visit, you had like a nursing room, and so the hospital was wonderful about that. They would have pump stations and everything for people. So I'd be like pumping, doing my notes, for the clinic patients, and answering pages all at the same time.
Wow.
And I remember this male attending told me, well, you're taking too much time to, away from patients. Yet the end result was that I had all my notes done on time. All of my patients were taken care of. And I was pumping.
Yes, girl.
It's like,
Oh my gosh.
But it was just one of those moments that really brought to light that now I tell my students, okay, guess what? There are federal laws in place that allow you to either nurse or go pump every 3 hours. And don't let anyone tell you differently, because I don't think, like, in full disclosure, like a male attending may not tell you that, but your female attending will tell you that. So attending is like somebody who's already completed all of their training and is the physician in charge. And so it's kind of our job to, like, empower female physicians, female medical students to understand not just like their worth, but their rights, because I don't think a lot of us know that. And so I remember being very distraught, thinking, gosh, like, do I have to choose? And then, I read the laws and I was like, no, I don't have to choose. And, like, my work speaks for itself. Like, I'm completing my work. My patients are being taken care of. Like, and I'm doing it faster than my counterparts. So how is this a thing other than just discrimination? Wow. And so I think that's the biggest thing that has changed for females in medicine recently, is that there's more of us who can say to our kind of students and trainees that don't stand for it. Like, if someone says, where's the doctor? Be like, I'm your doctor. Mm-hmm. I am your doctor. And it's okay to say that and not feel intimidated by those questions, and not feel intimidated by, male counterparts, maybe making comments about, picking up your kids or scheduling your surgeries around recitals. Like, there are just some things that we can stand up for, because it's okay to do that. But we did not, I don't think that we had that even a generation ago.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing that story right now, because I'm sure that there are people who are listening and just, that experience of feeling like you have to defend yourself in something that's essential to life, like it's just
Absolutely.
mind blowing to me.
It is. And these are physicians, right? Like this was a like a pediatrician man. So like it's again, you don't see it as often in
Sure.
peds, but you see it. I think it's much more prevalent in the surgical fields and maybe other fields that females aren't necessarily the majority, like in pediatrics.
Mm-hmm.
So I really feel for my counterparts in some of those other fields, because I think they get like, I can't even imagine the stories that they could tell you.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Building a successful business takes a clear understanding of your goals and where you want to go. That is why I love Cube Money. It is an app card combo that allows me to assign a purpose to each dollar in my checking account. No more wondering where you stand in regards to your bills, because with each transaction, you make a mental check-in with your balance. Create goals and stick with them in your lifestyle and business so you can live more and stress less. Go to cubemoney.com/Camille to get started today. That's Cube spelled QUBE money.com today, and make those dreams a reality. Okay, so you're taking yourself, you get through school, you become a doctor. How did you get to the point from being in pediatrics and then developing Ahimsa, where you thought there needs to be something different? How did you go from doctor to inventor? Because how cool is that? And it not only is it beautiful, but it's actually there to help our children in their health. Take me on that journey. Yeah.
So the irony is it all came from my fellow pediatrician moms. So we, I had like 5 close girlfriends from residency. We all did pediatrics together. Everyone went on their own way. Some people did specialties, some people did general pediatrics, and we kind of have always been close friends since that time. And so we often text each other about mom things, about home things, about patient things, even like, hey, I've got this case. Does anyone have any ideas? And so in one of those threads in 2018, one of my friends who's a neonatologist texts and says, have you guys seen this AAP, the American Academy of Pediatrics policy statement on plastic? What are we supposed to do? Like, oh my gosh, I've been putting all of my water bottles in the dishwasher. What are you all doing? And that was the first time that we really discussed like a major kind of policy statement that was coming out, and basically said there are chemicals in plastic that we know are harmful to children's health. And so in order to kind of decrease your exposure, here are some things that you can do. And one of those was avoid using plastic, avoid putting them in the dishwasher, and rather use glass or stainless steel. And so all of my friends were like, oh my gosh, like, what are you going to do? And their heads were kind of spinning, because like, honestly, that's what's out there for children. Is
absolutely.
And so I had basically pulled out my very traditional Indian stainless steel, because I had a moment during my own kind of journey as a mom. My kids were 6 months. I was introducing solids. So I did what every other parent did. I went out and got these cute little bowls, these little suction bowls and cute little spoons, and they're all plastic. I got through one feed, I think, until my mom came over and was like, oh, what are you doing? Like, don't use plastic. It's bad. This was like 5 years ago, before the statement came out. And I was like, really? And she was like, no, that'll, leach chemicals into your food, and don't use that. I'll bring you all of our stainless steel from home. And so she replaced my entire cabinet. I actually went off to work, and I came home and my cabinets were cleared. And so talk about an Indian grandma. Like she was like number
She's
one mama bear. Yeah. So she had replaced. So I had actually made that same mistake because I was unaware. And then go figure, 5 years later, the AAP proves my mom correct. And that was a real shining moment for her. She was like, I told you, like, when moms are right, you're like,
oh yeah. Moms are always right.
They're always right. I had already been using stainless steel. And so I just kind of sent them a picture of like, this is what my mom, this is like in India, this is the standard. Like, this is what we use. And so when I sent them the picture, all of them were like, oh my gosh, could she get me sets? Can I get 6 sets? And I was like, what? Like, there's got to be something. And when I looked on the market, it's overwhelmingly plastic. And so there was a real disconnect between the science and what kind of the pediatricians were saying and what's available for parents. And so I thought, well, I mean, billions of Indians are using stainless steel. Like, that's what I grew up on growing up. And actually, in fact, when my kids go to visit my parents or my in-laws, they're eating off of the same stainless steel that I did at the dining table. And so that's where the idea came. It was like, it's just a cultural norm that's not here. And so kind of as we started this whole conversation about cultural norms, like that tradition of eating off of stainless steel at the dining table was something that I and many, 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 many Indians are used to. It was kind of a no-brainer. And then the one thing that for me, I knew that children like colorful things and they like characters and they have to be excited about their meal. And so that's where the idea for the color came from. And so I had seen in the operating rooms various implants, so like things that actually went inside patients' bodies, but they were metal, but they were colorful. I was like, well, whatever they're doing must be safe because it's going to go inside. Yeah. And so I use that basically existing technology and existing stainless steel dinnerware kind of like from India and kind of married the two. So it really truly was like medicine and my like cultural traditions and roots in India kind of just like merged together, like right in front of me. It was crazy. Like I was meant to do, like, I always joke that like, I didn't create Ahimsa just kind of like plopped itself in front of me. It was like, do this.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, I didn't know that talking about your culture would be so integral to your story. I mean, it really is.
It really, it's kind of the basis of everything. It just happens to be that the medicine just validates the roots and the traditions, you know? And you often see this. This is very interesting. If you've ever, how old are your kids?
The oldest is 12. So I have 12, 10, 7, and 4.
Okay. So you've been through that newborn period.
Yeah.
And you know, in that first month, right, your pediatrician is like, okay, if they have a fever, call me. Like, you have to go to the emergency room. Like, if it's a big deal, right? In those first, that 28 days, that first month. And in India, there's a ceremony at 28 days of life that is like celebrates the infant and kind of like, you know, you're really not supposed to go to the house before then. You're not supposed to expose the baby to a lot of things during that time. And so there's a tradition around it. There's a ritual around it, all this stuff. Well, go figure, in medicine, in pediatrics, so the actual scientific evidence shows that babies less than 28 days are at very, very high risk of infection. And so that's why if a baby who is 28 days or less has a fever, they automatically get like a spinal tap and blood drawn and are admitted to the hospital because they're so high risk of getting infections then. So it's interesting that, again, yet another like tradition and kind of cultural norm is really backed by science. And then this is just another kind of way to look at that. You know, it's like there's actually physically wrong with something in plastic, but there's nothing in that same caliber with stainless steel.
Wow.
You know, science just proves it, I guess.
You know, and don't you think it's fascinating that your life's path really wove itself this perfect, like you said, it just came into your lap. And can we talk about, I feel like we need to back up a little bit for those who are listening and want to know, well, what is the problem with plastic and what are those findings and what do I need to know? Because I remember at that time, it was when my youngest is almost 5 and I nursed him. I nursed him for 9 months. So it was just those last few months he started taking a bottle. And I remember asking my doctor, do I need to go out and buy all new bottles? Like what? I mean, it was only a couple months. He's like, you're fine, you know, but tell our audience, what are
Yeah.
the dangers of plastic and what as parents do we need to be aware of? Because I feel like this is something that just backing up to those basics, we need to
Yes.
talk about that.
Yes. So I think that's really important because it's like, okay, so here's the thing. We all know plastic's bad for the environment, right? We've that's like clearly laid out there. We see microplastics in our ocean. We see kind of the effects that it's having on our ecosystem. And that's kind of been the breaking news over the past decade. But what many people don't know, because it is, there's a lot of research in the past decade that's kind of like incremental. It's not just like, oh, it's doing this. It's like the evidence is going like this, like shooting up.
Wow.
On all these studies that are showing that the chemicals in plastic, so the things that you hear about, BPA, right? We think about BPA, but BPA is just one part of a family called bisphenols. So things that are in plastic, so bisphenols and phthalates and perchlorates, all these fancy words, those are chemicals that are used to make plastic to make it really helpful, right? So it doesn't break, so it can fold a little bit. And so they're in there for a reason, but it turns out they're not great for the environment, but these specific chemicals are really not good for your body. And so the way that they interfere with your body is they interfere with your hormone system. So we call them endocrine disrupting chemicals. Endocrine just means your hormone system. So the endocrine system is, you may have heard things like your thyroid hormone or your cortisol, like all of these different hormones. Hormones are just, your hormonal system is just a series of communications between different parts of your body. So various organs. So like your brain will communicate with your thyroid, which communicates with your, adrenals, like all these different glands. So it's a big communication system within your body. And that communication system is really important for growth, for brain development, for, just normal things like your heart rate, even your thyroid function is really important for your heart rate and your blood pressure and things of that sort. So the issue is that kids, they don't have a fully developing endocrine system yet. So as they're growing, that stuff is still developing and they're growing. I mean, if you think about, your child at 1 to 5, I mean, that's a big spurt of growth. And so it's really important in kids. So the endocrine system is important for everybody, but it's particularly important for kids because they're going through such rapid growth, such rapid development. And so these chemicals, they essentially look like our chemicals in our body, which are our hormones. And so they're real tricky. They kind of go in and it's kind of like if you think about a lock and a key, it almost looks like the same key. And so it goes in and kind of blocks the action that the normal hormone should be doing. And so it interrupts all of these signals. When you do that, it can have real consequences on a child's growth, on their brain development, on their sexual development. So when we talk about sexual development, we think about like puberty and how that kind of normally develops. And so it's a really big deal that no one knows about. And so even physicians, even because this is not like front line on our physicians' tables yet. It is over the past 2 years, it's coming out into our grand rounds, into our medical schools. And so we are ourselves learning about it at such a rapid pace. And so until we really educate the clinicians, you're probably not going to hear about it much from your pediatrician, who's also learning about it at a higher level. But so that's why it's not so mainstream yet. And so that's why it's so important. And if you think about, it's very much like lead, back in the day, we didn't know lead was bad for our kids' brains, but then we figured it out. We were like, there's a connection here. And then we studied it and then we made recommendations. Let's remove lead from gasoline. Let's remove it from paint and let's change the regulations on what goes in our children's products. And lo and behold, we have a generation of children who are 4 to 7 IQ points higher than the children before lead was removed from all these things.
Wow.
So there's a real impact. And so it's the same story with plastic. It's just, we're at a different point. We're at the beginning of the story. And so I really hope that I can kind of scream from the rooftops, the beginning of the story, so we can kind of all gather together as parents to make the end of the story come much faster,
Okay. So I've had the same set of IKEA cups and plates for years. And I'm just thinking, I want to go throw them all away right now, just listening to this. How does it seep from the actual plate? They're not eating the plates, obviously, but how does that transfer into the body? And what are there any plastic cups that are safe? Because kids drop everything.
That's such a great question. Okay. So in general, plastic is just leaching in general. So that's why like the AAP, they talk about that, like food packaging, even it's always better to try to eat the fresh fruit. Like why we package like a zucchini in plastic wrap is beyond me. Like, I don't understand that, And so it's just the nature of plastic by itself. So I'll just do kind of a quick comparison. So when we talk about plastic versus stainless steel, the reason the AAP recommends glass or stainless steel over plastic is that glass and stainless steel, they're called inert materials. Inert means just it doesn't interact. And so that's why you see stainless steel like rods and things like inside your body, because it doesn't react with anything. Whereas plastic is not inert. So it will interact with things. There are certain things that will make that interaction even worse, like heat. So that's why the AAP says, try not to use plastic. Definitely avoid, these kind of plastics. And then on top of that, if you're going to use plastic, don't put it in the microwave and don't put it in the dishwasher. Because here's the thing, there are all these recommendations, but we also have to think about what's practical. So if the entire market share is plastic and parents, that's all they have to choose from, well, it's like baby steps. Okay, maybe try to not put them in the dishwasher or the microwave. That's like step one. Then try to like avoid using them. And then try, to use of various things like glass or stainless steel. Kids break things, which is why I think personally stainless steel is the better option than glass. But glass in itself is a perfectly good material. And so those are the kind of things that we have to start educating. So heat will increase that leaching and also etching. So if you look at some of your plastic cups and stuff that you've had for a while, they're probably fraying. They probably have like some melting spots. They probably are kind of like scratched up. If you see those signs, that's another thing. It's time to throw them out because they're really like, you shouldn't use them for this purpose because those chemicals are leaching into your child's food.
Oh, I'm like so grossed out right now because everything you just described, like scratches, we have plastic cups right now that have scratches on them. And okay. So,
but here's the thing. I think it's really important because I think the other part of like my mission, listen, I didn't do this to like launch a company. I did not create like colorful stainless steel dinnerware for kids because I felt like I wanted to run a company. Not why I did it. I did it because there's a very clear solution to the problem with plastic.
Yeah.
Billions of Indians are doing it. And many, many other countries are also doing it. So it's not a hard fix. It's just, I happen to be one of the first people doing it. So It would be lovely if more people offered products like this. Like there's a market share for everyone and that's okay. But we have to be able to offer these products to parents. But I think the other big thing to know for parents is don't freak out. Like, don't go down the rabbit hole. You didn't do anything wrong. Science is evolving, as we clearly see with COVID. As we learn more, we can make better recommendations. And so I think there's a few key things that you can do as a parent without freaking out and like being like, oh my gosh, I've totally damaged my child forever. Because that's not the case. The beautiful thing about decreasing your child's exposure to all these chemicals is that those levels like that they have in their bodies, like from the exposure, which by the way, should be zero. Like they really you shouldn't have bisphenols and phthalates in your body because it's like not normally in your body, right? But by making very small changes, those levels can drop within 3 days. So that should be really encouraging to parents instead of like a doomsday scenario. Feel like, okay, now I know, and it's really simple and it can really impact my child. And you should feel empowered, not scared, Like, I think that's really important for parents because I think a lot of times when they hear this, they're like, oh, what did I do? Like, I got to go change my entire life. It's not that you have to go and like change everything, but there are certain things. So like number one, eating kind of fresh fruit, fresh vegetables, things that are less processed because everything, like I talk about it in terms of dinnerware, but remember all the packaging, The cans of food have a lot of like bisphenols in the lining of the cans. So by just, buying fresh food, you're already in the right direction. Okay. So that's like a number one. That's easy. Just try to buy fresh produce when you can, fresh food when you can. And then if you are going to use plastic, don't put it in the microwave or don't put it in the dishwasher. And if you are going to use plastic, try to avoid 3, 6, and 7, because those are like the worst ones. And then like really use glass or stainless steel. Like these are like small, simple things. Like a lot of people have transitioned from plastic water bottles to stainless steel water bottles. And so my hope is that these are like really small little things that you can do that drastically change what, your exposure for your child, whether that's with Ahimsa. Like, again, if I had my like, business mentor, they would be like, don't say that. But whether you buy Ahimsa or some other product, I truly, truly did this entire venture, this entire journey for children's health. Cause like, that's what I trained to do. Like that is what my passion is. And so if we can just educate parents on, the problem with plastic, why it matters, and how we change our kind of buying behavior. So whether that's with Ahimsa or go out and buy glass and other stainless steel, it's fine. But I think the biggest thing is empowering parents to make those decisions, but also that the industry has to change. So like you have to have options. So if we're saying try to use glass or stainless steel, well, you should have options as a parent and not feel like you have to buy plastic because that's all there's out there. And I think the other big thing for parents to understand is that the regulations are nil. I have seen them firsthand. It's frightening. It's frightening the lack of oversight in our children's products. And so, I'm a business owner. I can take care of my business and what I put on the table for your child. But it's really important that kind of legislation changes so then that there are better guidelines and guardrails. So companies can do a better job of putting safe products for your children. And so that's like the other thing that I really want to stress, that as parents, you can change things by just changing the way you purchase and picking up the phone and calling people and be like, hey, why is this way? Why is no one looking out for me? I'm trusting you to be regulating this stuff. And I can tell you it's not. So the good news is that we don't need to wait until like the lead movement where like all of our children are cognitively delayed before we do something. Like we can kind of band together and be like, yeah, this is not cool. And we're going to band together as parents. And that's actually what led to the BPA movement, right? So it was a bunch of parents being like, this is ridiculous, and like calling and making phone calls, and they changed it. But the problem is that's only one chemical. So even if it says BPA, it still has bisphenols in it. And the replacements, like the BPSDF, like you can name a letter, they're equally as bad, if not worse. And so there's just got to be better guardrails in place at a regulatory level so that industries can really, take some more accountability for what they're putting in your children's products. Because I can tell you as a mom, it's really scary what I found out.
Yeah. So tell me about transitioning to the idea of creating this business. Was it scary for you to transition into, doctor, hello, amazing. And then also now inventor, what was that transition like, and creating a business? Was that intimidating for you?
Yeah. In some ways, yes. In some ways, no. So I think inherently doctors are not risk takers, right? We have a very set path. This is what we do. We get to our end goal. And even for our patients, we're not risk takers, right? Like we want to do the lowest risk things, whether it's a procedure or a decision for a patient. And so inherently, we don't take risks. Entrepreneurship is the exact opposite of that. And, just putting yourself out there saying, this term minimal viable product, that's like not even a word we can even remotely use in medicine. Like like clinical trials, lots of testing, make sure things are like pretty near perfection before you do anything. And so that was a big leap of faith for me to all of a sudden be like, okay, I'm just going to launch this company. But what was not intimidating is the learning, because that's what we do as physicians. it's been lifelong learning. Like if there's one thing that we're really, really good at is learning. And so being able to read voraciously about stainless steel, about the coloring process, about how to start a business, it was just like reading textbooks, taking notes, like I was in school all over.
Mm-hmm.
And so that felt pretty comfortable to me. But, taking that like leap of faith to be like, I am going to start a business was very intimidating, very frightening because, I'm surrounded by a lot of other physicians and we don't know this space. We don't take risks. And so I think it wasn't until I started interacting with other entrepreneurs. And one thing that they said to me, they said, well, why not? And I had to really think about that. I was like, well, I can list all of the reasons, but nothing is detrimental. like those decisions on the medical side are like life and death decisions.
Yeah.
And then here it was like, okay, well, what's the worst thing? Like I fail, but I tried something and I, like learned something new, And so that was the moment I thought it's too big of a deal when it comes to children's health for me not to try. And so I think that's what empowered me to not be so scared, to just do it because I felt like, again, I wasn't launching a business. It's never like that has never been my mindset. I was creating a solution to get out there to fix the problem with plastic. Like that was my kind of journey. So it just happened to be in the form of a business and in the form of products.
Honestly, I think those are the best kinds of businesses because you see a space in the marketplace where you want it for yourself and realize that it doesn't exist and where you have so much heart and care behind it of really caring for children. That is going to power this business forward. I can't wait to see what happens. Like I'm just at the sidelines here going, this is incredible. And I'm so grateful that you had the insight and the foresight to do it and to create an option for our kids.
Yeah. It's listen, as pediatricians and as parents, we are de facto advocates for our children, right? They can't vote. They don't have jobs. Like they don't contribute to society in a monetary way. So they often get sidelined. Right. Mm-hmm. And so, coronavirus is kind of a prime example. Like our schools are closed, yet the bars are open. I'm not saying anything about small businesses. I'm a small business owner. I very much believe in like supporting small business, but I think it just shows you that kids don't have a voice often because there is always like economic issues and voting rights that they don't have. And so it's our job. It's like our job. I always say this, it's our job to fix it. It's like, there is no other option for them. They don't have a job to go choose what kind of plate they eat off of. And so it's our job to fix it.
Yeah. Well, this has been absolutely incredible hearing your story and how you were able to create such a beautiful product. Where can our listeners buy your product?
Yes. So we are online on our website. It's called Ahimsa Home, AHIMSA home.com. And you can find us on Instagram or Facebook at Ahimsa Home USA. And so those are our kind of two places. I think we also have like a Pinterest page. So please do share and pin us and tag us and like us and all the things because I have not been on social media for 10 years. So I need your help.
Yes. So I'm looking at your packaging right now. So it looks like it says designed in the US, made in India. So do you have connections to your home? Like, how were you able to set that up so that you could facilitate that manufacturing? Did you have connections from family or?
Nope. Just lots of cold calling. So
okay. So you just got in there.
Just picked up the phone, called as many people as I could, and then found somebody who was willing to take a risk on this whole, let's try this colorful stainless steel. And really finding somebody who was able to take that journey with me was a blessing. But so my husband and I flew out to India to meet this person and to like understand the process because I was like, if I am putting something on your dining table with your children, like, it better be like, I better know what I'm doing, and I better like meet the person face to face who's going to be making these products and hold them accountable for every degree of like safety and quality.
Yeah.
He probably didn't know that was going to be his journey, and have somebody so demanding. but that's, listen, it's children's health, and we got to take it really seriously. And so that's the end product is hopefully, you know, really high quality items that are safe, that are teaching tools for children to eat kind of a healthy portion and variety of food. And hopefully like that you just get to keep them forever. Like, that's my business model. Buy less stuff and just keep it forever. And you pass it down to your children, and you don't pass it on to the landfills. You know, like it should be a win-win for everyone.
Well, I only have one set, so I definitely need to buy more. And I think you should make adult size, because these are so beautiful. They really are.
They keep cold things cold. So they're really great for after bedtime, beverages, if you will, for parents too.
I was thinking ice cream, but yeah, that it has multiple uses.
Well, ice cream is so perfect in our bowls, because they're like they're the best ice cream bowls and the best popcorn bowls, because they're just, you know, the right size.
Yeah.
But yeah, I get that all the time for parents. And here's the secret though, parents, including myself, I eat off of these plates all the time, because that's another thing. Like, we're not just these pretty plates. Like, we have such a mission behind it with education about the plastics, but also about children's health. Like, if you look at portion sizes, like there's this big portion distortion on what our portion sizes should look like, and
especially in America. Yeah.
Yes. Like, our bowl sizes are specifically designed to be a cup, and our cup sizes are specifically designed to be a cup, because studies really do show that children, when presented with a larger bowl, waste like 30% more and eat almost double. And so it's not that we're trying to limit their caloric intake by any means, but it's really like, these are tools to kind of educate and kind of, you know, visualize these like really more age appropriate and normal portion sizes, rather than, you know, like the super size me plate, because you can always refill your plate, but there's no reason to consume more than your body like really needs, or waste it and put it back into landfills. Like, you can always just refill it. And so that's kind of our philosophy, is everything is intentional. So our boxing has no microplastics in it on purpose. So you can actually take it to put it in your recycling, and it will get recycled. So everything is really intentional.
Well, thank you so much for coming on our show today. This has been so wonderful getting to know you and your product and your business and your hard work. You just have such a big heart. Like, I can tell that you did this because you love kids, and you did this because you wanted us to have a better solution. And I'm so grateful for that.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for having me on, and sorry for any technical difficulties. I am not as tech savvy as I am like heart heavy.
Well, that's not a bad thing. Well, thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you.
Today's review comes from Sir Farts a Lot. I loved listening to this while I was exercising. It keeps me interested and inspired. I felt like I could meet my goals for the day as simple as they were, while focusing on my larger goals with my side gig and how to better it. Well, my dear Sir Farts a Lot, thank you for listening. And I'm glad that it has helped to inspire you to reach your goals. It looks like you are using your time very effectively, and I love that you have a sense of humor. Keep on listening, and thank you to all who are listening. If you want to leave a review and to be featured as your review of the week, please go to wherever podcasts are found, leave a review, and you could have a chance to have your review shared here. Thank you so much for listening.